Once again, the Queen of Consorts surprises us, but not in a good way.
Made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
The royal family had survived scandal, betrayal, and private war. But nothing prepared the palace for the moment Prince William placed his signature beneath a decree that erased every remaining privilege attached to Camilla's royal position. There was no ceremonial announcement, no carefully staged reconciliation, and no last-minute hesitation. With one stroke of a pen, the future king drew a line that even his father could no longer ignore. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William read the final page twice inside a locked Windsor office. He removed his signet pen, a pen marked with his royal symbol, and held it above the signature line, while an aide waited near the door. The prince felt no victory. The decree would strip Camilla of protected residences, palace staff, ceremonial precedence, private security, royal jewelry, restricted archives, and influence over household appointments. More painfully, he knew the act would place him against Charles. The signature changed everything. The emergency decree, a formal order designed to take effect without delay, was written as protection rather than revenge. It declared that Camilla could keep her dignity, but not the institutional power granted by the crown. That distinction mattered because those privileges shaped who entered royal spaces, influenced official decisions, and stood closest to power during the monarchy's most important moments. Charles received the sealed copy during a morning meeting. He read the first paragraph, lowered himself into a chair, and placed the document on the table without speaking. The king understood the scale of her loss. He also understood his son's resolve. William had crossed a line that could not be erased with a family conversation, and the monarch's silence exposed how deeply the decision wounded him. Secrecy protected the order until the final moment. Only 3 people knew its complete contents, and the document had been drafted away from the usual royal secretariat, the office that manages palace papers. The future king feared interference, altered wording, or confrontation before the decree became binding. Buried inside it was one devastating sentence. No marriage, title, or personal connection could override the crown's duty to protect public trust. Camilla still believed a household review was underway. She had not seen the order or realized that every remaining privilege had already been marked for removal. Yet a courtier was moving towards her private rooms with the sealed decree in hand. As the sealed file moved through the palace corridors, the question was no longer whether Camilla would lose power, but what would happen when she discovered that William had taken it from her personally. Behind the titles and guarded doors were 4 people trapped by different versions of loyalty. William believed he was defending the crown. Charles saw an attack on the woman he had spent decades protecting. Camilla feared that the security she had fought to build was collapsing beneath her. Catherine understood that her husband's decision could save the monarchy while tearing apart what remained of his relationship with his father. William carried more than the burden of palace management. The crown, meaning the authority and responsibilities of the monarchy, represented the future his children might one day inherit. He remembered his mother's pain, the years of public distrust, and every warning that had been ignored because confronting the family seemed more dangerous than remaining silent. To the prince, the decree was not revenge. It was an attempt to stop old wounds from becoming a permanent weakness inside the institution. Camilla saw the same document through completely different eyes. Over time, she had gained ceremonial access, loyal advisors, influence over invitations, use of royal residences, and a voice in household decisions. None of those privileges appeared overwhelming alone, yet together, they had given the queen consort the ability to shape the court around Charles. She had been assured only weeks earlier that her position was safe, while the king stood beside her. Now William's signature proved his father's protection could be bypassed. Charles touched the edge of the decree and felt rejection before responsibility. Alone in his private room, He quietly asked why his son had not spoken to him first. The monarch knew there had been earlier warnings, but he had treated them as family tensions that could be softened with time. Now the pages before him showed that time had run out. He had spent decades protecting Camilla, and the future king had just declared that love could no longer shield her authority. Catherine found her husband standing beside an unlit fireplace with both hands pressed against the mantel. She did not praise the decision or pretend it had been easy. Instead, she told him that defending the monarchy did not mean he had stopped feeling like a son. William admitted that placing his name beneath the order had felt like closing a door on his father, perhaps forever. She stayed beside him because she understood the decree might protect their future while destroying what remained of his trust in Charles. Anne had quietly ensured there would be no escape route. According to a documented account prepared during the secret drafting process, she reviewed the constitutional language, meaning the formal wording that defines royal authority, and refused to soften it. The princess insisted that every removed privilege be named separately, so no courtier could restore Camilla's influence through private arrangements. Yet the fracture had begun before the signature. It started during one guarded family gathering, when Camilla made a demand involving Catherine, the order of succession, and a ceremonial position William believed should never have been challenged. To understand why William finally declared that enough was enough, the story must return to the evening when one request turned years of buried resentment into a point of no return. Every royal crisis has one moment that appears small, until history reveals its true weight. In this case, it came during a private planning dinner at Windsor, when Camilla pushed a ceremonial request across the table and expected automatic approval. William read the page, looked towards Catherine, and realized that the issue was no longer etiquette. It was an attempt to redefine who held authority inside the future monarchy. Tension had been building for months. William had received complaints that Camilla's private office was contacting staff involved in future royal planning, changing guest priorities, requesting restricted schedules, and presenting her wishes as permanent orders. Those actions mattered, because the heir's household was meant to remain independent. If another office could quietly control its staff and decisions, the future king's authority would be weakened before his reign had even begun. Camilla placed the amended seating plan directly in front of him. Royal precedence, the formal order deciding where senior family members stand or sit, may appear ceremonial, but it signals who holds importance before the public. Her request moved Catherine away from the king's immediate line, so the queen consort could take the central position at future state events, including occasions built around William's growing role. She called the change necessary continuity. William slowly pushed the page back across the table. He said Catherine's position would not be reduced to protect anyone else's insecurity. The prince kept his voice controlled, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. Camilla stiffened and stared at him, while Catherine gripped the edge of her chair and remained silent. She understood that defending herself in that moment would only turn a constitutional dispute into a personal fight. Charles asked his son to lower his voice. The king wanted the room calmed, yet his intervention only deepened the fracture. Camilla then claimed he had already approved the principle behind the change. The monarch did not confirm it. He paused, glanced down, and allowed several seconds of silence to pass. That hesitation told William more than any answer could. She may have been using his father's name to force decisions that had never received clear consent. Anne waited until the dinner ended before approaching her nephew. Through a documented account prepared by her private office, she handed him a file containing altered guest lists, attempted access to heir-related briefings, disputed ceremonial jewelry loans, and instructions issued without written authority. The princess made clear that the banquet demand was not an isolated mistake. It was the latest move in a pattern. William closed the file and made his decision. Private warnings had failed, and silence had only encouraged further pressure. He requested one final face-to-face meeting with Camilla, offering her the chance to surrender the disputed privileges voluntarily before he used formal authority. The next morning, William entered the meeting, determined to offer one final choice. But Camilla arrived convinced that Charles's protection made her untouchable. There were no aides, no secretaries, and no prepared palace smiles when William and Camilla faced one another across a narrow table at Clarence's house. Between them lay the disputed records, the altered ceremonial plan, and years of resentment neither could fully conceal. William had come to offer a private solution. Camilla believed he had come to intimidate her. Within minutes, the conversation became a declaration of war. William opened the folder and laid out his final terms. The prince asked her to surrender access to future king briefings, influence over Catherine's ceremonial position, authority to direct heir-related staff, and private use of restricted royal property without written permission. A household restructuring meant a quiet internal change in duties and access, not a public punishment. Had she agreed, the queen consort would have kept her dignity, protection, appearances beside Charles, and a limited ceremonial role. Camilla pushed the folder away without reading a single page. She accused him of dressing old pain in constitutional language and using his mother's memory to humiliate her. William answered that the past was not the issue. The problem was every boundary she had crossed after being warned to stop. She rose so suddenly that the chair scraped backwards, but he remained seated, his voice low and exact. Charles became the wound neither could avoid. Camilla warned that forcing the matter would break his father and destroy whatever trust remained between them. The future king's restraint finally cracked. He said the king's feelings had protected her from accountability for too long, and the crown could not keep paying the price for a private marriage. That mattered because personal loyalty had begun shaping official decisions, while staff connected to the next reign were being pressured from outside William's authority. Camilla then revealed more than she intended. She told him that senior household figures owed their positions to her and would not accept being pushed aside. The queen consort meant it as a warning, but the words confirmed his darkest fear. Her influence was not limited to ceremony. It had become a network capable of slowing orders, resisting changes, and weakening the independence of the future court. William closed the folder. The prince rose, looked directly at her, and said, "You leave me no choice." He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply took the file and walked out, leaving Camilla beside the displaced chair as the door closed with quiet finality. Camilla reached for the telephone the moment he was gone. She called Charles and demanded that he intervene before his son destroyed everything they had built. The king heard the panic in her voice, but the approval process was already moving through Anne, constitutional advisors, and a royal mechanism designed to prevent personal pressure from stopping the order. Camilla still believed the king could stop his son, unaware that the authority behind William's decision had already been secured beyond the reach of personal persuasion. Royal power rarely announces itself with raised voices. It moves through sealed pages, carefully chosen words, and signatures placed where personal emotion cannot erase them. Camilla had always relied on Charles's loyalty as her strongest defense, but William's decree was designed around a brutal reality. The king could protect his wife emotionally, yet he could not allow private devotion to endanger the monarchy's succession or public authority. William's authority came from more than his position as heir. The decree joined his control over his own household, his duty to prepare the next reign, and emergency provisions allowing disputed privileges to be suspended when they threatened the independence of the future court. Those provisions were formal safeguards used when private influence risked weakening public trust. They mattered because staff, briefings, residences, and ceremony were not decorations. They were tools of power. Anne made the document harder to escape. Princess Anne insisted that Camilla's marriage to Charles remain separate from the privileges granted by the crown. The distinction was simple but severe. She could remain his wife, but staff control, ceremonial influence, royal residences, jewelry access, security arrangements, and confidential briefings were benefits that could be withdrawn. The princess demanded that every privilege be named, so no courtier could restore it quietly later. Charles faced his sister in a private meeting and asked why William was moving so quickly. The king expected hesitation, perhaps even sympathy. Anne gave him neither. She placed the final draft before him and said the family had spent years moving too slowly. Her calmness unsettled the monarch because she was not speaking as Camilla's rival. She was speaking as someone determined to protect the institution they had inherited. Charles moved towards the window and pressed his fingers against the frame. He asked whether the wording could be softened, but his sister warned that softer language would create loopholes, meaning gaps that could later be used to restore the same power under a different name. The king admitted that he could not bear to watch Camilla lose everything she had fought to gain. Anne answered that love could comfort her, but it could not govern the crown. Catherine refused to benefit from the fall. William's advisors suggested transferring some of the removed ceremonial privileges directly to her, yet she rejected the idea. The Princess of Wales understood that accepting them immediately would make protection look like victory. Her decision blocked Camilla from claiming that the decree was merely a personal power grab designed to elevate another woman. Charles finally made his choice through silence. He would not endorse the order publicly, but he would not stop it either. By stepping aside, the monarch accepted that his son's constitutional duty now outweighed his own need to shield his wife. The decree had been written in formal language, but its true force would be felt through empty rooms, unanswered instructions, surrendered keys, and doors that no longer opened for Camilla. The first consequence arrived without ceremony. A senior household official entered Camilla's private sitting room, carrying a slim inventory folder, and asked for the return of 3 keys. In that instant, the decree stopped being a distant legal threat. It became physical. Every key, every cancelled instruction, and every silent member of staff confirmed that the royal world she had spent years securing was being dismantled around her. Camilla listened as the official read the first list. She had lost independent access to restricted Windsor rooms, private archive material, heir-related schedules, ceremonial jewelry storage, selected royal vehicles, and staff assigned through the central household. The central household was the main palace system that controlled royal staff, property, and official support. From that moment, every request would pass through a reduced personal office, with no power over William or Catherine. The Queen Consort heard the second list and felt her public role narrowing sentence by sentence. She could still appear beside Charles at approved engagements, but she could no longer decide ceremonial precedents, alter seating, approve joint appearances, appoint household figures, or represent the crown without written permission. Those losses mattered because they removed both her visible status and her quiet influence behind closed doors. Camilla pulled one key from the chain and held it tightly. Her fingers closed around the metal until her knuckles whitened, yet she refused to place it down. After a long silence, she asked whether Charles had approved the humiliation. The official answered that the decree required no further approval. She finally released the key onto the table, and the small sound carried the weight of surrender. Charles found her later with the inventory folder still unopened beside her. The king asked whether she had eaten, but she ignored the question and demanded that he reverse the order. He could not meet her eyes. The monarch's silence hurt more than the decree, because it proved that the protection she had trusted for years had reached its limit. Camilla asked again. He still gave no promise. Distance spread quickly. Courtiers who once answered her requests without hesitation now asked for written guidance before speaking. Their caution exposed a brutal truth. Much of her influence had never been permanent. It had survived because everyone believed Charles would defend her. One dispute remained. Camilla claimed that a ceremonial jewel and a private apartment were personal gifts rather than crown property, meaning assets owned by the monarchy rather than an individual. William ordered a full review, knowing the records could reveal something even more damaging. Before the review was finished, Camilla requested a second private meeting with him. This time, she asked for no lawyers, no staff, and no protection from Charles. Stripped of the machinery that had once amplified her voice, Camilla was finally forced to confront William not as queen consort or palace power broker, but as one wounded human being facing another. For the first time since the crisis began, William and Camilla met without files, advisors, titles, or threats. There was no decree on the table and no king waiting in the next room. She arrived carrying only a handwritten note. He entered prepared for another demand. Instead, Camilla asked a question neither of them had ever confronted honestly. Had William decided that nothing she did could ever separate her from the pain of his past? Camilla had chosen a small royal cottage away from the main household. No aides attended, no minutes were taken, and both agreed the conversation would not change the legal force of the decree. That mattered because every earlier exchange had been shaped by rank, Charles's protection, constitutional arguments, and palace procedure. This time, there was nowhere to hide. They had to speak as two people carrying years of grief, distrust, and fear. The queen consort admitted what she had never said aloud. She had spent years believing the family would never fully accept her, and the public would always see her as an intruder. That fear had driven her to hold every privilege tightly, demand visible recognition, and treat Catherine's rising role as a threat. Camilla confessed that she had mistaken security for control, and control for survival. William listened without interrupting. The prince told her he could not erase what his mother had endured, but the decree had not been signed as revenge. He had acted because she continued pushing authority beyond its proper limits, even after repeated warnings. His voice softened when he said that understanding her fear did not mean surrendering the boundary. Compassion could explain the damage, but it could not undo responsibility. Camilla placed the handwritten note on the table. She had authorized the voluntary return of the disputed ceremonial jewel and the private apartment still under review. Crown property, meaning items and residences owned by the monarchy rather than by one person, would no longer be contested. She no longer wanted Charles forced to choose between protecting her and preserving peace with his son. William read the note, then gave her the only mercy he was prepared to offer. The future king would restore no privilege, but he promised there would be no public humiliation and no attempt to separate her from Charles. Her marriage and private dignity would remain protected, even as her institutional power ended permanently. Camilla accepted the terms because fighting further would destroy the man she had relied upon most. William accepted her surrender because victory without restraint would turn duty into cruelty. For the first time, neither of them left the room pretending the past could be changed. The conflict inside the family had finally softened, but beyond the palace gates, the world was about to deliver a verdict far louder than anything spoken in that quiet room. At 6 o'clock the next morning, Britain awoke to a front page unlike any the palace had expected. Across the center was a photograph of William leaving Windsor, with a sealed black folder beneath his arm. Above it, in enormous white letters, were 4 words: "The heir draws the line." In a single image, the public understood that this was not merely Camilla's fall. It was William's arrival as the crown's decisive protector. The palace responded with only a few careful sentences. Its statement confirmed that household privileges had been reorganized to protect clear constitutional boundaries, meaning the limits that separate personal relationships from official royal authority. It avoided attacking Camilla directly, yet the silence around her service spoke loudly. Every line focused instead on William's future responsibilities and the need to protect the next reign. The country divided almost at once. Some broadcasters called the decree a necessary modernization, arguing that marriage could not be allowed to create unchecked power. Others described it as a ruthless family intervention that proved the prince was willing to place the monarchy above his father's feelings. Both sides agreed on one point: the future king had acted, and the crown had shifted around him. Outside Buckingham Palace, the tension became human. Crowds gathered beneath the balcony as television crews reported live. One woman held a handwritten sign that read, "Duty before privilege." Nearby, another placed flowers beside the gate for Charles, and quietly said the king had lost peace inside his own family. Their gestures captured the nation's divided heart: admiration for William, sorrow for the father he had overruled. Charles watched the coverage alone in his study. The monarch saw the same newspaper image repeated across every channel, until one commentator called his son the king in waiting who has already begun to rule. He switched off the television immediately. The phrase wounded him because it suggested his reign had already been overshadowed. Yet he understood why the public responded to William's decisiveness. Public opinion then delivered its own verdict. A rapid national survey showed strong support for removing unaccountable royal privileges. The result revealed that most people were not demanding personal punishment for Camilla. They wanted firm limits around influence, access, and authority. The queen consort had become the face of a deeper concern about whether private loyalty could quietly control public power. Camilla's advisors urged her to release a sympathetic statement. She refused. The queen consort remembered the promise made during her private meeting with William and would not turn the crisis into a public war. Her silence confirmed that the decree was permanent. The nation had accepted William's boundary. Camilla had surrendered her resistance, and only one unfinished reckoning remained: the painful truth between a king and the son who had overruled him. The final meeting did not end with forgiveness, but it did end the war. Charles stood opposite William, in the same room where he had first read the decree, the original document resting between them. Neither man pretended the damage could be undone. A father had been wounded, a son had crossed an irreversible line, and Camilla's royal power had ended. Yet the monarchy they both served was steadier because someone had finally acted. Charles read the decree one last time. Every disputed privilege had now been removed. Camilla would remain his wife, keep her personal possessions, preserve her private dignity, and appear beside him in a limited supporting role. But the queen consort would no longer control staff, residences, ceremonial precedents, crown property, confidential schedules, security structures, or decisions affecting William and Catherine. Ceremonial precedents meant the official order deciding where royal figures stand, sit, and appear during major events, and losing it ended her ability to shape status through ceremony. The king looked at his son and admitted that the decree had made him feel powerless inside his own reign. William answered that he had never wanted to diminish his father or turn their private pain into a public victory. The prince had acted because love could not be allowed to replace accountability. Their words remained painful, but neither man raised his voice. Neither walked away. For once, they allowed the truth to remain in the room without trying to soften it. Charles closed the folder and pushed it across the table. He said he could not approve of the way the decision had been forced through, but he finally accepted why it had become necessary. The monarch understood that the new written rules would separate a sovereign spouse from institutional authority, meaning no future consort could quietly turn personal access into permanent royal power. William placed his hand over the file and nodded. There was no triumph in his face, only the exhaustion of a son who had protected the crown at the cost of his father's trust. Camilla completed her surrender in silence. Before leaving the private apartment she had once controlled, she placed the final ceremonial key inside a small envelope addressed to Anne. The queen consort added a handwritten note stating that royal privilege belonged to the crown, never permanently to the person allowed to use it. Anne read the message twice, then sealed it inside the official record. The princess understood that the final key carried more meaning than any public apology. Catherine met William when he returned home and asked whether the conflict was truly over. He told her the decree would stand, and Charles would not challenge it. The princess took his hand, knowing he had secured their future, while losing part of the relationship he had once hoped to repair. With every privilege surrendered and every challenge withdrawn, the decree became the final boundary between private loyalty and public duty. And the monarchy survived because William was willing to enforce it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.